Arc 7, The Land of the Wolves. Chapter 42, Beast of Ambition. Albert, I've taken the liberty of making tea for myself, does anyone else want some? The moment he heard the shrill old voice, the blood flow in Subaru's body began flowing backwards. His skin covered in goosebumps started aching, the air he had taken in froze over within his lungs. As if a heavy, sharp object had been buried deep in his chest, Subaru's soul was urged to awaken. Return by death had activated, and he had been thrust into this most terrible of situations. Tarita, hook. A moment later, before Subaru could react in any way, Tarita took aim with her bow. The target was, of course, the uninvited visitor who had suddenly appeared in the room, Albert Dunkelkin. One of the 9 divine generals, and the old man who had murdered Subaru and the others just 10 seconds ago. Even without knowing the circumstances, the unmannered way in which he broke the ice would make one wary. Nevertheless, in the same room, Albert, while having an arrow pointed at him from ultra-point blank range, as if to ridicule the caution displayed by Subaru and the rest, shrugged his shoulders and... Albert, whoa, don't do it. I don't like having pointy things aimed at me. You know, old people go to the bathroom more often than not, and you want to scare them into pissing their pants? I'm shaking in my boots here, yeah? Tarita, you're kidding me. Who are you? Abel, Albert Dunkelkin. Tarita's face flushed with anger as Albert ignored her piercing hostility. But it was the man with the Oni mask, Abel, who drew the attention to him as if to interrupt her, calling out the old man's name. Unfazed by his appearance, Albert's gaze turned to the man concealing his face, the one who had spoken his name. And so it began, a gut-wrenching battle that left him with an awfully thirsty impression. Subaru. While keeping the conversation between Albert and Abel on the perimeter of his consciousness, Subaru matched the unchanging scenes of this world to that of his own memories. Just before, the events of around merely 10 minutes prior. In those was where he must search for a breakthrough in fate. Can you do it? Subaru, hook. While in those thoughts wishful of a breakthrough, a cold voice wedged itself in, catching him off guard. Born of impatience and frustration, it was none other than the feeble voice of Natsuki Subaru himself. Subaru, can you do it? He wiped out all your friends just a moment ago, ending in that mess. The more he tried to remember what had just happened, the more the voice whispered to Subaru, devoid of mercy. Subaru's failure, his blunder, his irreparable mistake. This second chance granted by return by death was not to make up for his mistakes. The mistakes he had performed were irreversible. The only thing granted to Subaru was atonement, which he could not really atone for. Because that was the sole product of the authority in Natsuki Subaru's possession. Subaru, hook. Albert, oh. What's up with Ja all of a sudden? Medium, whoa. What? Lewis, you. You. He slapped his cheeks as hard as he could with both hands, trying to shake off the snide remarks that had been whispered in his ear. A dry sound echoed through the room. Albert, Medium and Lewis screamed at Subaru's sudden action. Although they had not raised their voices, Al and Tarita were just as surprised. Of course they would be. It was unfortunate, but it just was necessary. Subaru. Once Subaru opened his closed eyelids, his vision, which had seemed wobbly and unsteady, became clearer. Within his field of view, in the midst of the people who had been surprised by Subaru's strange behavior, a single gaze was trained on him in silence. Only the Oni mask-wearing Abel was as unfazed and composed as he had been at the time of Albert's first appearance. What lay within his heart was wholly unknown. Subaru, sorry for surprising you. I had to motivate myself. Albert, a lil kid with red cheeks and a big smile on his face, how nice. Aren't ya that one? Aren't ya perhaps the girl in red from yesterday? Ya startled me. Detecting the eccentric behaving Subaru's real identity, Albert raised his thick eyebrows in interest. Just like in the previous loop, Albert had again now made the connection between Subaru and Natsumi for the first time. Going along this line, having confirmed that Albert was the mastermind behind the infantilization, it was possible to bring about negotiations. However, they would be committing the same mistake, then. Albert was a dangerous man. At the very least, Abel's circumstances could not be relayed as to get Albert on their side. As soon as he found out that Abel was the real emperor, that Abel was Vincent Valekia, he would disclose his own long-held ambitions and make an attempt on his life. He was a potential enemy already. The rest. Al, that's my bro. Even the shinobi head honcho didn't know who you were. Albert, oh, how impressive. I wish the people in my village could learn from that transformation. How about being a lecturer? You'd be welcome. Subaru. Albert, guess it's impossible to talk peacefully. Seems I've put ya on your guard a tad too much and made a tad too grand an entrance. I messed up. Albert stuck out his tongue and admitted he had made a mistake. However, the situation in which this would warm up or soften the atmosphere had long passed. Subaru had not the slightest intention of relaxing his vigilance toward the old man. Prior to his assault, Albert had stated that human faces said a lot. Probably, the combination of his good-natured attitude and casual behavior, as well as the surprise produced by his silent intrusion into the unprotected room, were all techniques to elicit the other party's true reaction. If the shinobi of this world and Subaru's perception of ninjas were of the same nature, then the entirety of Albert's conduct should consist of traps, poison, and all kinds of ninjutsu. He would spare no effort to achieve his goal. Albert, you best not take me lightly, cause I'm an old man with a short life ahead of me and all that, though. Gonna have to get a lil rough, taking into account how much time I got left in me. Tarita, rough. Are you going to fight us in this situation? Albert, kaka. Well, it's true I might get a lil jumpy with a bow pointed at me, don't ya think? But fightin' isn't the only method for me to get my way, is it? Medium, wheel, what do you mean? What are you trying to say, Gramps? Tarita and Medium cast a question towards the sincerely muttering Albert, who shrunk his small body even further. The old man's cheeks twisted into a smile at the pair's questions. Their height difference had been flipped around. Then, with his hand, he pointed at Medium and then at Al, the two trying to block his exit route. Albert, it's hard to do this and that haven't been shrunken, isn't it? I did that. It's a kind of shinobi technique. Strange and interesting, right? Al, old man. Albert, don't be angry, one-armed young'un. In fact, ya can thank me. I'd be miffed if I killed ya by accident before I could have asked ya any, so I just shrunk ya. With Al closing in on him for an answer, Albert spoke and stopped his advance. Upon understanding that the words spoken to him were indeed true, Al's breath caught, and he fell silent. Indeed, this statement of Albert's was both true and factual. Had he so desired, he could have killed Subaru's group during the battle of the previous day, at the Crimson Lapis Castle. He could have pierced their hearts with a simple thrust of his hand, instead of this infantilization technique. The fact that Subaru and the others were still alive, even after becoming small, came down to nothing more than the whim of the old man. So Subaru thought, but... Albert, well, even if I tried to kill you for real, you'd VE blocked all my attempts at doing it, so I just did it out of desperation, you know? Right, young'un? Al, I wonder what you're talking about. Albert, kaka. You won't tell me about your trick? I can't really blame ya. If I could though, I'd ask ya how to do it in detail and leave it in my book of secrets. Al, it doesn't matter how many times you say it. I wonder what you're talking about. His face covered by a piece of cloth, Al answered in a muffled voice. That response should not match his expectations, yet Albert nodded with a is that so, seemingly enjoying Al's reaction. Subaru? On the other hand, Subaru had no idea what could be the meaning of the current exchange between the two. During that fierce battle in the castle tower of Crimson Lapis Castle, Al had done the work of several people to save the lives of Subaru and Medium. Or perhaps the one who had squared off against Al there, Albert, had noticed something shimmering in his fighting style. However, even if Albert's words were true, Al's technique, influenced by the infantilization, would not work on the shinobi. Subaru had already been witness to the results of that, with his very eyes. And derived from that, came about an absolute truth. That would be, under no circumstances whatsoever should they ever wage battle against Albert. It was that simple. Everyone. Albert was lazily playing with his teacup using both hands. Tarita trained her bow and arrow on him, and Al and Medium likewise were ready for battle, but they would be killed helplessly. There was a tremendous gap in strength between Subaru's group and Albert. If they fought Albert, they would be annihilated. No, even if they attempted to escape, one or two people may be able to escape, but the chances of that were incredibly small. They needed to get Albert to leave peacefully, at all costs. However, there was no time to have a discussion regarding that. Subaru, why? He could not help but lament that he had been forcefully returned to this moment. He was aware of it being a thought terribly filled with pride and selfishness, as he had been granted a second opportunity by return by death. Had he at least returned before Albert's appearance, he would have been able to consult with his companions at least. Most recently, he had returned by death repeatedly when facing Todd in the fortress city of Darrell with little time to deal with him. Remembering this brought Subaru much suffering. At that time, he'd had to restart while already being in the sight of the threat. Currently, while the circumstances were different, the conditions were similar. In other words, the restart point had placed him in the same cage as the bloodthirsty beast. Originally, the time traveled by return by death had not been consistent, but this was quite serious. Or, perhaps, the authority that had been bestowed upon Subaru had been compromised in some manner. Subaru, let's put that aside for now. He should not curse the lack of time, and commit the folly of wasting what little time he had. Subaru would not be the only one to pay for his own stupidity. Subaru, Albert-san. You're able. You claimed your technique shrunk these people. Subaru, oh. Subaru forced himself to change his mind and attempted to call out to Albert. In order to get out of this situation, he had to be careful about every word he said, every action he performed. He wanted time to discern the best choice of words, or to put it another way, so he had spoken with the intent of buying time. However, Abel interrupted him, covering Subaru's voice with his own. His words discouraged Subaru at the outset. Now in an embarrassed state, Subaru looked at the man donning the Oni mask, and then came to realize his aim. Abel did not even glance back. His real intention was to substitute for Subaru's role. That would be, to give Subaru the time required, and draw Albert's attention. Albert, oh, that's right. I forgot we gotta talk about that too. Old people always go off on tangents. It puts a strain on my flesh and bones. Abel, you? Cease with the droll humor. If you claim your old age is weakening you, you should relinquish the rank of General First Class as soon as possible. If you do not, you have already made up your mind. Albert, well, you got a point. The mask makes it hard for you to see my body, but yet can peer into my thoughts just fine. Abel, of course. Devoid of hesitation, Abel nodded, and Albert's eyes took on a curious look. There was no longer any doubt that Abel's true intention was not to expose Albert's true nature, but to buy time, considering his posture of dragging the conversation. Subaru did not know how Abel had realized that he needed time, but... Subaru, this isn't the time to be distracted. Putting aside his displeasure at having been seen through, Subaru thought about what to do. If Albert came to know of Abel's true identity, he would fulfill his ambition to murder the Emperor. Therefore, he could not disclose his hand to Albert. However, there was no way he would leave without seeing what they had to offer. Abel, you are a General First Class, your rank presently that of third, so it may be said that you rest at the top of the empire. However, your nature is a greedy one. Even that position is far from satisfactory. Albert, well, being treated as a with-Aaron old man isn't quite that bad, but I get the feeling being called a greedy old man isn't all that nice. Kaka. Abel spoke of Albert's character, as seen through his own eyes. Albert listened happily, wearing a broad smile, but the darkness hidden in the depths of the shinobi was something that Abel, of all people, had misjudged. No, it would be more appropriate to say that he had not obtained an accurate reading. Albert, so? What does a disgruntled man like me want? Abel, the seat of first. Albert. Abel's words were uttered in a quiet yet unwavering voice. As soon as he heard this, the sound of Albert's breath disappeared, like dead leaves rubbing together. The old man's eyes narrowed under his long, thick eyebrows, as he locked gazes with Abel. Subaru did not know what was going through the shinobi's mind, but he was sure what Abel had pointed out had made Albert's thoughts buzz. But that... Albert, one-armed young'un, don't make any strange moves. You too, archer girl, you're also making it obvious cause of your breathing nut. Did not mean that Albert's attention had been diverted, or that any chance had been created. With Albert's face still turned toward Abel as he spoke, Al and Tarita gulped. They had been most likely searching for a faint opportunity the moment Albert focused on Abel. But even that probing gesture did not go unnoticed by the seasoned observational prowess held by Albert. Al, Hook, you've got eyes in the back of your head? Albert, what I'm saying isn't that you're not diligent enough. Differences in experience. But from my point of view, most people are inexperienced. It's an old man's theory that cannot be beaten. While displaying a toothy grin in response to Al's groaning, Albert's gaze never left Abel's. He could deal with any of Al and Tarita's tricks without even looking. Even if he did not say it in actual fact, from this transcendental being's posture, it was clear that he was thinking it. Moreover, they currently did not possess the ability nor the cards in their hands to overturn that. Subaru, Al. Giving a shake of his head, Subaru advised Al to stay out of it. Although Subaru did not have a complete grasp of Al's abilities and skills, he was probably a skilled fighter who specialized in defense. As showcased by the battle with Arakia and the previous day at the castle tower, his ability to survive the enemy's attacks despite being on the defensive was something that even Subaru had to admire. And yet, in this state of having been infantilized, he would not be able to wield it to the fullest and would end up being killed. Albert, you surprised me by telling me I mean for first, though. Why are you blurting out something that crazy, masked young'un? Abel, it is evident. Your ambition is not so shallow that it shall dry up just because of your old age. The shinobi push their bodies and minds to the extreme, and merely a scant few can reach such states. Goes without mention that you are their leader. And the hour upon which you are complete shall not come till the day you die. Albert, Crossing his arms, Albert nodded briefly at Abel's words. It could be taken as missing the point, but the lack of response only made its credibility stronger. In actual fact, Subaru knew that Abel's point was incorrect. Albert's true intentions, and the ultimate goal of the shinobi head honcho, was to murder the emperor. Different from rising to the top of the 9 divine generals. However, Albert's reaction was proof that Abel's point was not far off the mark. Ultimately, what Abel was pointing out was the thirst within Albert. What Abel had speculated as a way to fulfill that craving was to take the title of first, the absolute most important rank in the 9 divine generals, of which Albert was a part of as well. But it was not unreasonable. He was a general first class, with plenty underlings as the shinobi head honcho, having lived a long life, now burdened with the typical fetters of old age. How had he come to notice the desire of having his name go down in history as the shinobi who had murdered his own liege the emperor, even if it meant abandoning everything he had gained in life? Abel was arrogant and self-centered and had zero consideration for others. Nevertheless, he was the emperor of Wallachia as an existence upon the imperial throne. The preservation of his own life held precedence. He possessed the self-awareness to know that, with his loss, the empire would become greatly unstable. That was the inevitable awareness that possessed by the Wallachian emperor, by Abel. And on the other hand, that should be a sense of responsibility held by everyone, even if not as strong as his. This was that which Albert Dunkelkin did not have. He did not mind dying, if so fulfilled his ambition. Even if it meant bringing trouble upon the people around him as a result, that did not matter. That extraordinary thought of destruction was Albert's darkness, and that which Abel had not been able to read. However, Subaru, Albert-san, you're not after the seat of first, what you're after is the emperor, isn't it? Natsuki Subaru did know the darkness of Albert Dunkelkin. A moment later, the color, smell, and feel of the air changed. Albert did not even turn his line of sight towards Al and Tarita, whose hostility was accompanied by their ability to get things done. Albert's gaze reacted to the infantilized Subaru's words. While holding a teacup in one hand and stroking his chin with the other hand, the old man turned to look at Subaru. That was because he could not allow what Subaru had just said pass by. Albert, boy, you've come out of nowhere again, I'm surprised. Subaru, are you surprised because I spoke up suddenly? Or was it? Albert, are you a skin me if I'm surprised you guessed right? If that were true, I'd be a very dangerous guy, kaka. Subaru. Opening his mouth wide, Albert tried to laugh off Subaru's words with gusto. However, Subaru was convinced that his inner thoughts were not as calm as they seemed. Subaru had done nothing else but to recite to him his own long-held ambition. In addition, this was a darkness that even Abel's eyes had not been able to see through until the moment it was about to be acted upon. Al, aiming for the emperor and killing him? Bro, that's a leap, even for you. Subaru, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I know that. There's no merit other than notoriety, isn't that right? Albert, well, can't say I don't understand the idea of being infamous over not being known. Like the one-armed young'un said, that idea's a bit of a leap. Subaru, but you're not denying it outright, Albert-san. Albert agreed with AL's doubting voice, but Subaru pressed Albert on. Honestly, he knew that he would be jumping into the danger zone, but even then he couldn't not do so. Abel had prolonged his conversation with Albert, while Subaru had pondered it over. As long as Albert's ambition was to murder his own liege, the emperor, Abel's true identity could not be disclosed, nor could he be told that the emperor was Chisha, a fake. It was inevitable that this bargaining chip of theirs had disappeared. Once this happened, in order to prevent Albert's hands from unmasking Abel, Subaru had come up with a method of warfare that diametrically opposed the original negotiation. Namely, foregoing the disclosure of their own hand, but instead disclosing Albert's own. Subaru, our objective is as I told you yesterday in the castle tower. We're going to overthrow Emperor Vincent Wallachia, who currently sits on the throne of the emperor. This should also align with your goal. Albert, wait, don't make me out to be some kind of traitor. This is treading on thin ice, boy, you're making me so scared that I'm about to piss myself. Subaru, but you aren't denying it nor stopping me from saying it for real. You're one of the Emperor's generals of the first class. With that future possibility caught with just his fingertips, Subaru moved forward in an attempt to fully reach it. Of course, that did not mean that the threat posed by Albert had diminished, nor that the danger had lessened. He was fully aware that with one wrong move, this place would become a bloodbath. But Subaru was convinced that this was the kind of talk that was possible as of now. Only after Abel's true identity had been revealed had Albert decided to take action. It was akin to some sort of suicide mission for Albert, in which killing Abel would fulfill his life's purpose. Without that conviction, Albert would not be quick-tempered during the negotiations. Even if he was a beast of ambition, devoid of the slightest sense of responsibility or loyalty, he would play the role of a divine general who faithfully obeyed the order of no interference given by the false emperor. Albert, that's, His Excellency's ordered me to stay out of it even though you've declared war right to his face. I'm not like Kathma, who gets mad all the time when it comes to the Emperor. Not wise to turn the fox girl into an enemy in this city. As expected, despite Albert hearing Subaru's appeal that could have just as well been derogatory, he nevertheless did not attempt to use force. However, he did not take kindly to Subaru's insistence, and his attitude naturally made Abel, Al, and the others put into question whether the shinobi's absurd ambitions were true or not. Anne. Abel, so would that be the ulterior motive dwelling within your heart that I was unable to conjecture? Albert, good grief, these guys just don't get it. At this rate, I'll just have Ta give up and acknowledge it's no use talking to Ta M. Among those who were skeptical, Abel was the first to accept the unbelievable details. Pierced by the glint in his eyes, Albert blurted out some excuse as if he didn't feel like it. There had been no reason for Albert to open his heart to Subaru and the others in earnest at this juncture from the get-go. Naturally, Al and the rest of the fighters were getting more tense due to Albert's attitude. Albert, stop it, you'll only end up losing if you start a fight. I'm telling you, the reason I won't use violent methods with Ja isn't 'cause I'm nice, it's 'cause I was told not to, aight? I'm prepared to get even with Ja if you folks make a move on me first. Tarita, GUH. That may be true. They hadn't fought yet, but they'd be back at square one if they tried to start something. Tarita's cheeks tightened at Albert's warning, her narrowed eyes darting a glance at Subaru and Medium. Seeing this, Albert nodded his head as if to speak affirmatively. Albert, bring back the shrunken ones, you say. That's a tad greedy, don't ya think? I'm thinking of leaving without doing anything, okay? Medium, but Gramps, you made us small, didn't you? Or is there anyone else besides Gramps who can bring us back to normal? Albert, I've never really thought about it. Girl, how old are you, really? Medium, me? I'm what, 20? Albert, then maybe if you wait 10 years, you'll go back to normal? Dunno, though. Medium raised her hand and asked a question, her cheeks reddening at his blunt answer. Albeit it was just Albert's bewildering attitude, his answer was troubling for Subaru and the others. But it was a fact that there was no way to get answers out of him by force, and no other method to undo what had been done. And yet... Subaru, you know you can't just pack up and go home. Albert-san, I'm going to have to ask you to stay with us a little longer. Albert, I don't wanna, though. Since you're treating me like an old man and all that. I'm an old man with a short life ahead of me, and I got the right to choose who I talk to with the little time I got. Abel, then, I shall present you with the opportunity to kill the Emperor. Immediately after that, Subaru gasped at yet another change in atmosphere, and gazed the one who had spoken, Abel. Abel had done nothing else than put his own life on the scales, that statement causing Albert to scratch his head with an oi. Albert, how many times do I gotta tell you folks that your premise is wrong? Isn't it pretty bad if you can't remember things better than me? Abel, if your goal is the Emperor's life, you have had many opportunities in the past. But you have not actualized it. Because the flame of the young sword protects the Emperor. Albert, oh. Abel, I can divulge how to overcome the flame. Albert's expression underwent a shift, becoming distinctly different from the facade he had held up until that point. The old man raised his eyebrows and stared at the Oni mask-wearing Abel with clear surprise. Abel, on the other hand, had risen from his chair, standing there majestically. Subaru, the flame of the young sword. What that meant, Subaru did not know for certain. However, it was true that for Albert, the shock was such that it made it possible to see through to the other side, breaking through the ostensible emotions that he had put up to this point. Based on the conversation, it was some sort of secret that protected the Emperor of Wallachia, and it was because of this that Albert's ambition had not come to fruition thus far. A method to remove those fetters and overcome them, that was what Abel had claimed. Albert. I thought all you did was hide your face and not care for the elderly, who the hell are you? You shouldn't joke round about such things. Abel, is your belief really that someone who weaves sophistry and jokes in a place like this can raise a rebellion against this mighty empire? If so, they would have to be either a madman bereft of sanity, or a great man with a lot of nerve. Albert, you're neither of those things, are ya? Abel, naturally. Concisely, Abel responded to Albert's question. Whether it was serious or just sophistry, Subaru could not decide. Or perhaps the man named Abel was the real deal, a madman, a great man, or all of those simultaneously. Albert. In reaction to Abel's reply, Albert fell silent for a moment. He raised his bushy eyebrows and brought his now utterly cold cup of tea to his lips. Then, once he gently placed the empty teacup on the desk beside him. Albert, I believe you were talking about the bell of fire time. Subaru, huh? With that sudden question, Subaru let out a stupid-sounding voice. However, the one to reply immediately with "that's right" and a nod was Medium. Her body now smaller, she pointed out the window, indicating the majesty of the Crimson Lapis Castle. Medium, Yornachan's calling us, so we'll be in trouble if we stay small. Albert, Yornachan. Kaka kaka. You've got real balls, lass. Medium? He tilted his head, amazed by Medium's boldness in addressing Yorna with Chan. At the same time, Albert did the same, now calmed down, gazing towards the Crimson Lapis Castle, pointed to by Medium, as he muttered right. Albert, putting aside the topic of whether I'm aiming for His Excellency's life or not, I sure am curious about how to get past the young sword that protects the Emperor of Wallachia. Subaru, hook. If that's the case. Albert, oh, come on, it's too early to tell. I'm the one who got your hopes up, but I got a lot of things on my mind. So, why don't we play a game? Subaru, a game? Albert, yes, a game. You like that, don't ya? Boy. Thrusting his finger right in front of Subaru's nose as the latter leaned forward, Albert so declared. As his eyes had been wholly unable to follow that movement, Subaru went stiff, stuck in place. Albert presented some kind of condition, or a game, as he called it, as a preface. Subaru was not sure if this was the way he wanted to avoid complete annihilation and improve this stagnant situation, but... Subaru, what if I said no? Albert, then you won't be able to get anything you want. Subaru. Albert, by the way, since you folks got what you think I want, the shinobi's techniques'll be coming down on you folks without relent. As if it were an obvious answer, Albert made that ruthless announcement. The old man was smiling, the sight of the dark emotions stirring in the depths of his pale, cloudy eyes brought chills. He may be having a peaceful and harmonious conversation on the surface, but under it, he was concealing a shinobi style of mercilessly reaping others' lives. Abel, what shall the game be? Avoiding a bout with Albert had been made impossible once he presented his conditions. Abel had sensed the same thing, and made his question in Subaru's stead, the latter unable to open his mouth. Albert nodded his head to that appeal, and said, right. Albert, we don't have much time before the fox girl calls ya, and I've been told not to mess with ya folks, so I'm in a bit of a pickle. Oh, that one's perfect. Subaru, perfect for who, Albert-san? For us? Albert, for both of us, me and ya. With a toothy grin at Subaru's drawn-out question, Albert showed his hands. Then turning to Subaru and the others bracing themselves, he spoke. Albert, tag. Everyone. Albert, I'm used to playing it with the young peeps from my village. Easy to understand, isn't it? Chapter 43, Hidden Behind Your Eyelids. That proposal spun by the hoarse voice greatly befuddled Subaru and the others. Everyone. The infantilization that had assailed Subaru's group and its mastermind, Albert Dunkelkin. Subaru and the others, who sought to negotiate with Albert in order to get him to release his infantilization off them, were presented a condition that was befitting of the old man, no, befitting of the monstrous old man who was toying with their bodies and minds alike, a strange condition, which would lead one's heart astray upon being heard. After all. Subaru, playing, tag. Subaru, who had been dreading what kind of unreasonable request was going to be posed, ruminated on the words he had just been told. At the sound of Subaru's voice, Albert, his hands up in the air, frowned quizzically. Albert, what's with the question mark? You're not gonna tell me you dunno how to play tag, are ya? Subaru, of course I know what it is. It's just that, it's not a word that should come up in this situation. No matter how it was framed, it was merely a child's game of tag. It was hard to imagine that there was another meaning to it. Although, since it would be the kind of game of tag played in a shinobi village, there was a good chance that it would have a unique set of rules. For example, something like Subaru, killin' isn't against the rules while playin', though, something like that. Albert, kaka kaka. Of course not. If that kinda nonsense were popular, the shinobi'd be extinct in no time flat. And that by my hands, with me bein' their leader. That'd be bad, wouldn't it? Although Albert denied Subaru's concerns, Subaru believed him to be a man willing to stain his own hands with the blood of his own people if necessary, taking into account his violent behavior and the things he had said and done so far. To be honest, he would not have been that surprised if that shinobi village of his had already been destroyed. Abel, that tag thing, how does it function? Rather than Subaru, who was burning with suspicion, it was Abel who urged him to go ahead. His cheeks twisting into a smile, Albert let out an "oh." Albert, you seem to be more enthusiastic than I'd expected, masked young un. Abel, foolishness. We have already passed the point of not getting into this game, as soon as we divulge that we possess the information you covet. Albert, kaka kaka. Well, guess you're right. Opening his mouth so wide that it looked like his jaw was about to come off, Albert gave a hearty laugh without reservations. In fact, Abel's point was correct. Albert's idea was vicious. Regardless of whether he won or lost this game of tag, Albert would obtain the information he desired. The purpose of this game of tag was to allow them to choose how they wished to give up that information, whether after negotiations or after torture. Albert, so, there's nothing really special about how tag works. One side runs away, and the other side catches the other. Oh, it'd be better if I were the one running away. You know, since chasing a large group of people rounds too much for an old man's stamina. Medium, so, if we catch Gramps running away, we win? That's easy to understand. Tarita, it's easy to understand, but... To Albert's explanation of the rules, Medium reacted optimistically, and Tarita pessimistically. Subaru's opinion was also leaning more towards Tarita's. Indeed, the rules were simple and there was no room for uncertainty to interfere. In other words, it was all up to one's ability. And on the topic of ability, the total sum of the ability of Subaru's group was nowhere near that of Albert's. Albert, well, might be hard with all the lil ones. Then we can loosen the conditions a tad. Tarita, and the person who did it, doesn't even feel guilty. Albert, don't get so upset, you know. If your finger comes off the bowstring, I'll have a good reason to defend myself, and it'll all become a lot easier. Tarita. As Albert glanced at the faces in the room and shrugged his shoulders, Tarita clacked her molars together. It was as the monstrous old man had pointed out, Tarita's bow still remained trained on Albert. However, the person in question, Albert, ignored it with a straight face, and rather used it as a bargaining chip. One could only imagine the mental turmoil Tarita was feeling. But the priority right now was... Subaru, what do you mean, loosen the conditions? Albert, talking about the way we'll be playing tag, here. How about, you don't have to catch me, but instead, if you find me, you win. But you'd have to do it thrice. Subaru, thrice. Albert, I'll hide thrice. Ya folks gonna have to try and find me 3 times. If you can't, you lose. In this case, it's no game of tag, it's a game of seek, which sounds kinda weird. It don't sound quite right, said Albert, cocking his head in puzzlement. Taking in the old man's suggestion, the words that came from within Subaru were... Subaru, hide and seek? Albert, oh yeah, that's a good name. We'll just use that. With a snap of his fingers, Albert clicked at the sound of hide and seek. As he did so, Albert held up one finger on each of his outstretched hands, and flashed them to the left and right on the spot for all to see. Albert, in tag, you only gotta catch me once. In hide and seek, you gotta find me thrice. I don't think I need to tell you which one you've got a better chance of winning, do I? Once Albert posed that question, shutting one eye, Subaru let out a gasp. Albert was right, this was a question that required no further thought. Given Albert's ability as someone transcendental, something Subaru was already aware of, there was no reason for them to opt for a game of tag. There shouldn't, yet. Al, ain't that so kind of you? Can't help but wonder if there's more to it, since you went to the trouble of suggesting a method that'd give us a better chance of winning. With Albert attempting to pass on the odds of victory to them, Al snapped at him. As a substitute for the helmet he had taken off, Al now had a cloth wrapped around his face. His voice, now high in pitch as he had become younger, was a bit muffled through the cloth, albeit not to the point that it was difficult to understand. Albert, having listened to Al's words, shrugged his shoulders. Albert, oi, don't make the mistake of thinking that I'm an old man who wants to win at all costs, young un. As far as I'm concerned, it'd be better if you folks win, okay? I'm doing this cause I want to know if you folks worth listening to. Al. Albert, as for me, I'm quite interested in what you folks have to say. But is it wrong for me to be worried about my retirement savings if I'm caught in some random lie and my loyalty to His Excellency's questioned? To prevent that from happening, I'm using my sluggish brain to come up with this plan. Waving his left and right indexes, Albert answered Al aloofly. Hearing that answer did not dispel Al's suspicions. But it was a reasonable answer, and he seemed hesitant to pursue the matter further. Subaru was not so easygoing as to believe that Albert was being truthful. However, there was too little time and not enough information to uncover what was within the mind of this accomplished shinobi mastermind. During all of this, the time limit that Yorna had given was fast approaching, second by second. With Albert's 2 inconvenient choices, neither of which was the best option, the chances of coming up with a way to recover from this were close to 0. To put it another way, Subaru had done everything in his power and still arrived at this situation. Abel, if we are to take up on your offer, we shall need to be clear about some matters. Albert, oh, what do you mean? Abel, you yourself have said so. If you wish to give us a higher chance at victory, you should not leave too much room for pointless exertions. What is desired from one another must be made clear. Albert. Kaka. Seemingly having reached the same conclusion earlier, Abel proceeded, "One I trained on Albert." Clarification of the rules of the game. What laid behind the demand for clarification was clear. It served as a sign that the decision was to accept the game and its content. Abel nodded, staring back at Albert, who gave a low chuckle, his eyes bright and blazing. And then finally, Abel, hide and seek it is. Following that, there were 3 major agreements made between the two sides. The first commitment was, do no harm to each other. Albert was capable of murdering everyone if he wished so, to begin with. What discouraged him from doing so were the false emperor's orders and his wariness towards Yorna. But this assurance was essential, because he would break this ban if the situation warranted it. The second was, limit the places of hiding to the city's boundaries. If they were to believe in the pretense of leaving the odds in their favor, limiting the area was also essential to maintain fairness. Of course, even if it were limited to the city, the play area was quite large. However, the conditions that Subaru had made him accept should do the job in this regard. The third was, clarify the conditions for victory. They had opted to play hide and seek because they believed that meant a better chance of winning. Then, no one would be able to say that it would be wrong to pursue victory. So, Subaru, I know the odds are different for us in tag compared to hide and seek, but why 3 times? Don't be stingy, can't we only do this once? Albert, kaka. That's a tad greedy, young man. Tell you what. If it happens once, it's probably a fluke. But if it happens thrice, it's skill. Subaru, some people think luck's part of skill, you know? Albert, hate to tell ya, but I don't believe in luck. I mean, that's what most of the Empire's people believe. Ya say some darn things, don't ya? It was an unavoidable school of thought, typical of an empire based on the supremacy of merit. There was no such thing as luck or misfortune, and everything was the result of one's own abilities. This attitude was seemingly suffocating for those unable to live without a refuge. For example, the Subaru of his days as a truant had no place in the Empire. Albert, in addition, why not do it thrice, cause there are 3 among you who've been shrunken? Sounds reasonable for a technicality I just came up with on the spot. Abel, then, every time we find you, you shall undo the technique on one person? Albert, oh, and now you're trying to take advantage of me. Well, let's just forget that technicality. Waving his hands in the air, Albert refused to confirm Abel's statement. Anyhow, with that matter settled, there was presumably nothing else left that required closer examination. That meant, Albert, well, let's play. Subaru, Albert-san, just double-checking a small detail. No hiding where we can't physically get to. There's nothing we can do if you're hiding in the middle of nowhere. Albert, you're a real stickler for detail, you know that? Well, I would have done it if you hadn't said that. Subaru. Albert, tell you what, I was serious when I said I don't need to win at all costs, you know? Don't forget though, this is your test. In other words, he was looking at them for their adroitness, shrewdness, and intelligence too. Albert appeared to be generous and easygoing, but he was severe when it came to cutting someone off. Were he to deem someone unworthy of his attention, he would rip their vitals out without mercy. Even now, if Subaru had not butted in, he would have done so in earnest. But Albert, I didn't think the masked young'un would have overlooked that. Indicating Abel by cocking his chin, Albert displayed him a cunning smile that did not hide his elderly age. Despite this annoyance, Subaru signaled Abel and Alt with his eyes, and once he made sure of their assent, he prepared himself to throw down the gauntlet. Subaru, if we win, I'll have you put us back to normal. Albert, if I win, you'll have to wait 10 years to get back to normal. Well, if His Excellency and the Fox Girl get any second thoughts, I'll go ask you for your secrets my own way. That would be a shinobi technique passed down in his shinobi village. Subaru felt a surge of fear as he regarded Albert's dark eyes, feeling that the method the old man had suggested could lead to torture. Then, before the old man headed to his first hiding place, he would ask a question. Subaru, so what's the first hint? It was a question that would be dismissed as ridiculous if this were a serious game. However, Albert did not laugh at this. Because this was a condition for victory that Subaru had forced Albert to accept for their game of hide-and-seek. Now that Subaru had been infantilized, Albert wanted to evaluate them not in terms of their fighting prowess or physical abilities, but in terms of their mindset and creativity, as mentioned before. To put it simply, it was none other than the natural feeling called not wanting to deal with idiots. Albert, first of all, a tryout. Near this inn, I'm gonna hide behind the eyelids. Subaru, behind the eyelids. Albert, well, hang in there, young man. Let this old man have some fun in what's left of his short life, at least. With a fluttering wave of his hand, Albert turned his back to Subaru and the others. At that moment, Subaru felt the tension in the room rise as the man walked away leisurely. Everyone. Who among them had not wished that they could pounce on Albert and solve the problems of the hide-and-seek and the infantilization at once, in that very moment? But nobody carried out that reckless act. And it was the right thing to do. Albert, kaka. Just before the door closed, Albert laughed because he knew what Subaru's hesitation was about. His behavior lived up to the title of vicious old man, his shrill laugh included, right to the end. And so, once Albert exited the room, and it was once again occupied only by Subaru and his allies. Abel, Tarita, lower your bow. There is no one to point it at anymore. Tarita, okay. After the enemy had left the room, Abel had Tarita lower her bow. Tarita's face, as she followed the instructions, was filled with shame. Naturally so. Albert had kept a cool face as she pointed her bow at him. As one of the Shudrak, no, as someone who had already been entrusted with the role of being the next chieftain, for Tarita, the old man's attitude was a mockery of the power of the Shadrakians. Subaru had allowed Albert to underestimate the people of Shudrak. This too was due to his own lack of strength. Originally, Tarita had accompanied Subaru to the Demon City to seek a pillar of support for her resolve to take over as chieftain. This would only have the opposite effect, rather than her gaining the needed confidence. Al, are you seriously gonna play along with that old man's games, bro? And so, Al spoke up towards Subaru, who could not find any words to say to Tarita. Al was wearing a face covering that did not quite fit, and his tone was filled with frustration and disapproval at this interaction with Albert. He always had the impression of accepting everything rather easily, and of letting things go, so it was surprising to see him react that way. However, since Albert keeps outmaneuvering them, it was understandable as to why he would be frustrated. Subaru, I don't feel good about being put through the ringer like that either. But we left some possibilities open at the last minute, right? Al, possibilities, you mean? Medium, there's a chance our original bodies can be restored, right? Subaru-chin. Medium was sitting on the floor, holding Lewis down as she struggled. She was restraining Lewis, the latter's size now almost the same as hers, with her skills, not her arm strength. Perhaps it was a skill she had developed at the orphanage where she had grown up. As she calmed Lewis, Subaru looked into her blue eyes and nodded, yes. Subaru, if we got him in a bad mood, our bodies would stay small. And that isn't something we can afford considering future plans and our current course. It's a must that we return to normal. Al, well, that's exactly what we could have done, we could have surrounded the old man and beaten him. Subaru, don't be stupid. The only reason we didn't die is because Albertsan was intending to follow the Emperor's orders. We wouldn't be able to do anything about it if he felt like it. Al. You say that like you've seen it before. Looking away from Subaru, Al sounded like he wanted to say that should be impossible. Al's remark was not off the mark, since Subaru's insight was because of a cheat transcending worlds. He had indeed seen it with his own eyes. Events that he had thought to be impossible had happened, even if he wished not to admit it. Nevertheless, Al. Averting his gaze, Al did not argue further. Due to the previous day's visit to the castle keep, Al had also grasped a part of Albert's strength. Naturally, he would know that the old man had not been serious back then, and that the odds of victory would be slim were he to demonstrate his true ability. That was why Al had made the decision to keep watching Albert's back as he left. Subaru, whatever, we don't have much time. If we're going to meet with Yorna, I need time to do my makeup. I need 30 minutes for everything, so the grace period's a little over 2 hours. Tarita, is it really necessary to wear women's clothes? Subaru, it is, because the 3 of us from yesterday are being requested, too. And? As he said this, Subaru looked at Abel, who was silent. As long as he did not interfere, Subaru guessed that he had the same basic policy as himself. Subaru did not believe he was getting lost in the emotions of having gone through a deadly situation. Or maybe. Subaru, shocked that Albertsan's trying to kill the Emperor, huh? Abel, nonsense. I knew he had ambitions beyond his size. Albeit, I did not think it would be the Emperor's head. I thought there was nothing to be gained by such an attempt. But what he really seeks is a final sense of accomplishment and the posthumous notoriety. Abel shrugged his thin shoulders as if to say he couldn't fully grasp it. Regardless of even having been forced out of his position as emperor and being driven into the most unfavorable situation, Abel never knew when to give up. From his point of view, it was incomprehensible to give up his own life and seek posthumous fame, as it would be best for him to return to the throne alive. On this point, Subaru agreed with him, though it was a very mixed bag of feelings. He did not want to be praised after death. Subaru wished to be forgotten by his remaining loved ones after he passed away. It was in Subaru's nature that he would rather be made a memory of and forgotten about in the moment of his death than for everyone to grieve or suffer for it. However, he had no intent to share that feeling with Abel. Subaru, but Albert-san's a bit of an outcast, isn't he? He's got all that ambition, but he doesn't even realize who you are in front of him. Therefore, Subaru deceptively changed the subject. But as soon as he heard that, however, Abel's eyes showed a suspicion that was clearly visible even through the Oni mask. Abel. What in the world are you talking about? Subaru, huh? Abel, I am wearing this mask. Hence why Albert's reaction is justified. Tracing the Oni mask's cheek with his finger, Abel made that declaration nonchalantly. Subaru raised an eyebrow at his words, his expression showing that he did not understand. Promptly, Abel's puzzlement turned into disappointment visible through his Oni mask. With that look in his eyes, Abel sighed deeply, and... Abel, this mask has the effect of distorting the perceptions of others. It is an effect that conceals the true identity of the wearer. Subaru. Is that really cognitive disruption? But that mask was originally supposed to be from the Shadrakians' village. Tarita, yes, that's right. It said that in the past, when the Emperor and Shudrak formed friendly ties, the Emperor used it to visit the jungle without being recognized. Subaru, that mask has actual history. With the revelation of that surprising fact, Subaru's mouth was left agape. To that shocked Subaru, Abel's disappointment still lasted. Abel, did you really believe that I have been wearing this mask all this time for show, or due to madness? Subaru. Abel, at last, your stupidity has reached its pinnacle. In the first place, there is plenty good reason to conceal my face. I believe we did not come to the Demon City for tourism. Subaru, you didn't have to say it like that, you could have just explained that at the start. Certainly, it was Subaru's fault for thinking it was part of Abel's odd behavior and not asking anything, but Abel was also at fault for thinking it would be understood without explaining anything. Thanks to that, he had to unnecessarily embarrass himself, and to worry himself without it being needed. Anyway, he was now aware of the mechanism as to why Albert had not realized Abel's true identity. Abel had no intention of covering up his pompous speech and arrogant attitude, so Subaru's fears that he would reveal himself were unfounded. Medium, hey, Alchin. That's what Abelchin's reason is, but is there a reason why Alchin's hiding his face? Al, in my case, I have a complex about my facial scars. But let's not talk about me. Hide and seek's already begun. We gotta get a move on. As he said this, Al pointed out the window to the streets of the Demon City. Chaos Flame was one of the largest cities in the Empire, amounting to probably 5 times the size of the fortress city of Garrel. To find the shinobi head honcho hidden among all that was no easy task. Find him 3 times, in just 2 hours and with only 6 people. Al, I know he said he was gonna do a tryout first, but there are a lot of possible hiding places just around the inn, man. Bro, do you or Abel-chan have some kind of plan? Subaru, it's not much of a plan, but... At least, there were some things Subaru had thought of that he wanted to try. A hide-and-seek tryout. Unsurprisingly, he'd had the same idea Albert did. An idea that should be tried at least once to gauge the mindset of their opponent, the old man. Just as Subaru thought that, Abel crossed his arms and nodded, of course. Abel, there are a few possible moves. Although, my idea is probably different from that of the clown here. Subaru, you're demoting me from a military strategist to clown, you're too uptight about that mask thing from earlier. No, it's not like I cared about being your military strategist or anything. Subaru could only curve his lips in a snarl at the sound of Abel's cold voice. It was as if the fact that Subaru had treated the Oni mask's disguise as an oddity was really upsetting the latter. Anyway, throughout that discussion here, time was being wasted. Subaru, I've got to get moving before I forget what having long limbs felt like. Al, well, dunno if there was ever a time when me and you had long legs, bro. Subaru, I meant compared to the current situation. The group pushed aside Al as he teased that they were all short-legged, and prepared the minimum amount of gear. Al carried his blue dragon sword in its sheath on his back, Medium carried only one of her twin swords on her hip. For now, Subaru would also carry his whip. However, he was not confident he could handle it in all honesty. All that was left was Abel and Tarita, who were in top condition, plus you. Medium, oh, Louis-John, you're so motivated. Alright, let's work hard and find Gramps. Louis, you. Medium raised a small fist at the sound of Louis's voice, not wanting to leave her behind. In the end, Louis was likely to slow everyone down. Albert had been forbidden to change his hiding place in the meantime, so they would like to believe that, even if he sensed the approach of the noisy Louis, he probably would not do anything of the sort. Al, isn't it possible that he'll change his hiding places from time to time and claim that he's been hiding in one place the whole time? Abel, I already corrected you on that, but Albert's goal is not his own victory. The reason he is performing such a roundabout move is to measure our capabilities through this game. Al, measuring our capabilities? That means. Abel, he wishes to know if I am capable of making such a big claim to the Emperor's throne. Abel made it clear to Al, who doubted Albert's true intentions. Subaru also saw no falsehood there. It was hard to believe Albert's own words, but since his goal was the Emperor's life, being able to believe the aim of Subaru's group, and the information in their hands being the real deal would be convenient. Albert wanted to be convinced by their party's demonstration of capabilities. And for that reason. Subaru, I didn't ask before, but what was that about the flame of the young sword? Abel, I am afraid I do not have the leisure to give a lengthy lecture on the history of the emperors of Wallachia. Your shallow wisdom notwithstanding, my plan is not something that can be set in motion in a room at an inn. Subaru, tch, okay. Subaru clucked his tongue at this manner of saying that he did not want to reveal anything. Nevertheless, if the exchange with Albert were indeed true, it seemed to him that the Emperor of Wallachia, or rather Abel, had some kind of protection. As long as he did, no harm would befall him. Subaru, on second thought. So far, Subaru had never seen Abel lose his life with his own eyes. Since arriving in the Wallachian Empire, Subaru's life had been threatened quite frequently, having actually lost his life and returned by death. However, Abel's death was an event that had never occurred. Although Subaru had been in situations which seemed like they should have resulted in Abel's death. When Albert revealed his true nature the very previous loop, or when Todd had the Budheim jungle burnt down, Shadrakian village included, the life of the imprisoned Abel should have been lost. But that was only because of the circumstances, not because Subaru had directly confirmed his death. So, he wanted to confirm one thing. Subaru, that thing called the flame of the young sword, is it still protecting you? Abel, how insistent. Will you perhaps turn against me as well, if you do not hear it? Subaru, there's no merit in me doing that. His cheeks contorting due to that mocking remark, Subaru gave up the pursuit this time. Then, Subaru looked around at the faces of his companions as they prepared to leave the inn. Subaru, unexpectedly, we have to play a game. But if the condition is that we just need to find a person, then we should be able to compete even in a situation where half of our members have shrunk. In fact, since it's a game of hide and seek, that we've returned to our childlike minds and bodies might even be better for us in this game. Tarita, what's the logic behind that? Abel, ignore him. It is nonsense, meaningless to listen to. In fact, that was right, since it was nothing more than banter, but he just expressed his regret with a wrinkle between his eyebrows. After doing that, Subaru shouted anyway, louder than he should have. Subaru, I want everyone to pay maximum attention to their surroundings. Okay then, let's go. Medium, O. Lewis, AUU. Al, you're really into this, bro? The enthusiastic Subaru was dressed in the clothes he had on hand, his figure looking quite unsightly. Al sighed as Medium and Lewis followed Subaru's lead, pumping their fists in the air. On the other hand, Tarita, who had become the strongest fighter, had nervousness and anxiety in her eyes, while Abel was as irreverent as ever, with no expression behind his Oni mask and nothing in his hands. All of their members left the inn together. First item of order was to locate Albert's first hiding place. Full of eagerness, Subaru slammed the door with a loud bang and stepped out with great vigor. Subaru, then, we'll return right away. Al, huh? With a hard step, he kicked the floor directly with his foot, and Subaru's body made a half-turn. Al let out a dumb-sounding voice upon seeing the other side of door he had just gone out of. With this in mind, Subaru pushed open the door of the room with force. Then Subaru pointed into the room from which he and the others had just left. Subaru, found you, Albert-san. Kaka. Oi, come on, don't ya have a bad personality, for ya ta notice this right away? I'm blushing here, bein' spotted this right out of the blue, it's so embarrassin'. And Albert, who had snuck into the room in Subaru and the others' stead, laughed heartily at Subaru's first declaration, as the latter pointed at himself. Al, seriously, bro? Al was surprised to see Albert in the room, who was about to refill his cup with cold tea. Much to his surprise, Medium and Lewis followed suit, with an "Oh, it's Gramps," and an "AA," respectively. Tarita widened her eyes, having peeked into the room as well. Delayed by those reactions, Abel narrowed his eyes once Albert's figure finally came into view. Abel, behind the eyelids, I see. He looked down at Subaru's young profile and muttered. Abel, did you know from the start that this was the place? Subaru, the expression behind the eyelids and the surroundings of the inn made this the first place I thought of. The type of person who offers you this kind of game's definitely going to try to do this at least once. A distant, nostalgic memory came to Subaru's mind with that answer, the memory of his first meeting with Beatrice, at the old Roswell mansion. Beatrice had attempted to have Subaru endlessly walk in the same space by creating a looping corridor using her magical ability. Unfortunately for Beatrice, Subaru had seen through her scheme at a glance and quickly figured out that the starting point was also the goal. Now that Subaru thought about it, he was sorry that he had not gone along with the cute Beatrice's ruse. But his opponent now was not the mischievous Beatrice, he was a monstrous old man, now wasn't the time for holding back. Therefore, he would distort his young face into a big grin and boast of his victory mercilessly. Subaru, honestly, I saw right through you, vicious old man. Albert, oi, don't kick me while I'm down. This is an embarrassment I can't let the young people of my village see at all. Why don't ya call yourself the vicious lil boy? Subaru, I'll pass on that. I haven't done anything to be called vicious, after all. Albert, well, that's just being humble. Ya even went to the trouble of speaking in a loud voice for me to hear as you left the inn. It was some great actin'. Subaru scratched his cheek at Albert, who raised one eyebrow and sneered at him. As expected, his intentions could be seen through after such an exaggerated act. However, even if he had been able to notice Subaru's true intentions, Albert had no way to change his hiding place. That was because this game was played by determining the hiding place they used first, and then giving clues accordingly. Subaru, I know it's really early in the first round to be discovered, but you're going to count it as one, right? You're not going to be in a bad mood just because I refuse to take on the name Vicious, are you? He wanted to avoid being dismissed because these were anticlimactic results, or something like that. To Subaru's request for confirmation born out of concern, Albert closed one eye and said, of course. Albert, my fault that the results were brought in so quickly. It's a bit unreasonable to expect you folks to mop up my mess. Twice more, as agreed. Medium, oh. You did it, Subaru-chin. We got the first win in about 10 seconds. Subaru, yeah, it's good news. With Medium to his side overjoyed, Subaru patted his chest in relief. For now, this concluded the first riddle from Albert. Indeed, it was a trial of sorts, borrowing the name hide and seek. It could be said that they were being asked to solve a problem on a test. They were being tested to see if they were worthy of Albert's attention. Subaru, all of it is because of Biko's. Help, he was about to say, as Subaru attempted to picture the adorable girl in his mind. However, for a moment, that thought was bleached white, coming to a full stop. Subaru. A feeling of slight discomfort and a slight tugging created a ripple in his heart. Before he could pursue a definitive answer to what it was. Albert, well, I gotta redeem myself, so I'll hurry to the second hiding place. Subaru, oh, yeah, you're right. So, what's the next hint? Albert, The next hiding place is gonna be something like. Folding his hands behind his back, Albert leaned his head and body in thought. However, he did not spend much time pondering, and so the old man contorted his cheeks. Albert, an abyss with a great view, you might say. Al, an abyss. Tarita, with a great view? The words of Tarita and Al completed each other as they ruminated on the bizarre hint left regarding the next hiding place. But Albert had no intention of leaving any further hints. Albert, you were better than expected the first time round, but the real game's about to begin. The old man smiled, his white teeth in full view, and then leapt backwards nimbly and gallantly. With that, Albert opened the room's window and put his foot on the windowsill without a care in the world. Then, right before Subaru and the others looking on with eyes open wide, he jumped outside. Albert, next time, I'll be sure to hide a little better. Al, wait, old man. Shit, he's gone. With haste and a yell, Al rushed to the window and looked around outside as he held his covered head. In fact, it would be difficult to catch Albert when he was dedicated to escape. His overwhelming ability to run away convinced Subaru that changing the game from tag to hide and seek had been the right call. Anyway. Tarita, Subaru, that man's next hiding place. Medium, Subaru-chin, did you understand? Do you know what it is? Subaru, that's. Tarita and Medium turned to look at him expectantly, yet Subaru was at a loss for words. As for the second hiding place's hint, an abyss with a great view, Subaru honestly found no clue that could lead to an answer. Subaru, sorry. Can't think of anything right away. It's not like I can read minds or anything, I just can read the situation. Medium, I see, I'm sorry. We can't keep just relying on you. We'll figure it out together. Tarita, yes, you're right. I'm not very good at using my head, but I'll keep thinking about it. Subaru bowed due to his uselessness, to which Medium and Tarita responded. The initial hiding place could also be called the starting point, a typical development of sorts that had been realized. Even if that had been off the mark, they could have easily tried it out in part because it was a location so close that there was almost no time loss. However, from here on, Subaru, it's simply going to be a race against time. Al. Bro also doesn't have an idea of where he's gonna hide next. Well, it isn't anything surprising though. Subaru, that's right. Maybe I can't be depended on, but it's depressing to be told that in such a clear way. At the start of the real game of hide and seek, his allies stabbed him in the back. Of course, Subaru took that as a fair assessment, but he really wished he would have been a bit less direct. Even close friends have some sense of consideration. However, in response to Subaru's words, Al waved his hand and said, "Oh, that's not it." Al, well, it isn't unreasonable for you to not get it, bro. After all, I'm here with you. Subaru, I really don't know what you're talking about. Is it something like, my IQ goes down when you're around, Al? What kind of system is that? Al, that ain't what I'm talking about, but it's hard to explain, right? Subaru, even if you ask me to agree, I still won't get it. As he spoke, Al's way of speaking, holding neither confidence nor certainty, was curious. He put Al aside, who was tilting his head, as he did not see how this topic could go any further in a constructive direction. The highest priority right now was to figure out the abyss with a great view clue Albert had left them with. Subaru, behind the eyelids, was the room where we started. An abyss with a great view, another way to phrase it would be. Tarita, with a great view means it's probably considered a high place, no? Medium, but an abyss is a hole, right? If it's a hole, wouldn't it be in the ground? Alternatively, it was possible that there was a spot in Chaos Flame described as such. In any case, it was unlikely that they would be able to reach the answer with the amount of information they could get from their room at the inn. At last, they would have to go into the city. Al, I can't get my head around this. Which reminds me, what's Abel-chan's plan? Abel, it is not something that can proceed here, as I have told you. It would be convenient to have as many people as possible. And in addition to that, a place where outsiders come and go. Al, you mean a place where strangers come and go? I wonder where in this city. The implementation of Abel's plan caused Al to tilt his head. The true meaning behind the idea of looking for a place where outsiders entered and exited was unknown to Subaru, but there was a good chance that Abel would not tell him even if he asked him to until they actually reached the execution phase. It could not be called an act that benefited their opponent, but it was difficult to deal with. Of course, he was a man who would even discard the cards in his hand without a second thought for the sake of winning. Subaru, if it's a place with a lot of people coming and going, that should be a place to drink. Tarita, a tavern? Subaru, yeah, there. I think we should try to go there or somewhere similar. It was debatable whether it was more beneficial to search for Albert without taking any detours or to help Abel's plan come to fruition, but for now, it seemed like a good idea to prioritize Abel first. With that in mind, Subaru and the others headed out of the inn with a renewed spirit. Abel, attracting the attention of the public with this crowd of children is not ideal. Subaru, don't complain because 4/6 of us are children. In the first place, you're not one to talk about public perception because of that Oni mask you're wearing. Or maybe, the perception. Does the effect of the mask make it look like it has a different face? Abel, the mask does not alter its appearance from an Oni's face, it merely hides my identity. Subaru, then you'll definitely stand out. With a small shrug of his shoulders, Subaru sighed, parrying aside Abel's misguided frustration. After greeting the shopkeeper at the entrance of the inn and asking them about the locations of some taverns, they went into the street. With that, they all walked towards a tavern to accomplish Abel's aim. And suddenly, in the middle of it all, Subaru, instead of having all of us going to the tavern, wouldn't it be better if we split up? One group goes to look for Albertsan, and the other goes to the tavern with Abel. It happened just as he was about to suggest that they split up. Subaru, huh? Suddenly, a scarlet light scattered at the edge of his field of vision, dazzling Subaru's eyes. And then... Oh yeah, that's a good name. We'll just use that. Subaru, you? An unexpected voice struck Subaru's eardrums as he blinked, his eyes simmering from the vermilion light. The sound and its suddenness made a silly voice leak out, and a giggle broke out right in front of Subaru. A low chuckle it was, causing Subaru's eyes to widen at its sound. Kaka. What's with the dumb voice? I was just complimenting ya on the good name. Subaru, Albert-san? An old man stood in front of him, clearing his throat and shaking his thin shoulders as he laughed. It had happened so suddenly that Subaru had to blink his eyes a few times, unable to understand it. Then, he swallowed his saliva and said what he had to declare. Subaru, oh, found you, Albert-san. Albert? Why's that? Ya already feelin' like you're playin' the game? Subaru, huh? He noticed a sense of incongruity upon taking that chance at the unexpected second discovery. Albert's attitude as he tilted his head and spoke that, coupled most of all with the discomfort regarding the scene around him, he was supposed to be out in the streets of the Demon City, but Subaru was in a room somewhere else. No, not in some room. Subaru, no way. Subaru was in a room at an inn. The same lodgings they had just come out of. And finally, there was the fact that Subaru was there, facing Albert and talking to him. Subaru. He had no choice but to accept that he had returned by death in contradiction to the rule that should have prevented that. End of chapters 42 and 43, Beast of Ambition.